Our drone pictures show the sandy scar that once was the Mananara River in southern Madagascar. Families are trying to find water. They've been reduced to digging holes in order to reach the water table, and the riverbed is pitted with what they've gouged out. They do their laundry in whatever liquid they can find. They wash themselves in this, and they drink this. They have no choice. This is what the worst drought in 40 years has meant for people here. It is as stark an image as you will get of just how changing weather patterns are impacting this terribly poor country and how so many people here are suffering. This is an example of what's happening to this country, the fourth largest island in the world, now so prone to extremes of weather that it's having a massive impact on the survival of the country, with the United Nations describing them as the first country which is on the brink of famine as a result of climate change. So the main health centre at Ambavombi is crowded with hungry babies and mothers. Many of them are in obvious discomfort, with bulging stomachs and yellowing hair, the telltale signs of acute malnutrition. Some have walked up to 15 kilometres to get here. But here they'll be given aid, and that just might save them. Soja Franco is called forward. The 10-month-old has been worrying the health workers. Last week she'd lost a whole kilo, weight she simply cannot afford to shed. But her cries are a good sign. It means she has the strength to protest. And this week there's a small cause for celebration. She's gained a few grams. For the first time, her anxious mother smiles. "I'm very happy," she tells us. But as the nurses measure her arms, the tape still shows she's in the red zone, well below what she should be measuring, and not out of danger. Everyone here is hungry. The World Bank estimates more than 90% of the Malagasy live on less than $2 a day. These are the ones who've made it to an aid centre. Even so, this desperation causes enormous stress. It's visible in every mother and baby's face. Most here will go to bed hungry tonight. Most don't know where their next meal is coming from. Most parents will not be able to feed all their children, and some won't be able to feed any of them. The lack of water has had a huge knock-on effect, not least on health, with poor sanitation increasing and ramping up disease. Rivo has worked in the south for nearly 2 decades and seen the droughts become longer and more extreme each year.
In all my years, the worst was last year, and it's set to get even worse this year.
The extreme weathers hit the most vulnerable and those least able to withstand it. Climate change is killing, and Malalaza is one of Madagascar's younger victims. She's barely got the strength to turn her head. She's the weight of a typical newborn. She's actually a year and 2 months old, with few reserves to fight disease. She's now got tuberculosis, but is too weak to make anything other than tiny murmurs of pain. She's living and slowly dying, and the warnings about what the UN calls an impending climate change famine aren't new. There's been years leading to this. Yet the health workers have few weapons to fight this environmental war, and without a shot being fired, they're seeing suffering on a huge scale. And they are losing. With the bulk of the country so poor, they're struggling to get enough to eat. Malalaza's mother says she's battling to feed any of her 6 children and walks 10 kilometres to find water.
Seeing how tough her life is, carrying water, lots of physical activity, this could be what's led to the baby's state.
There are other contributory factors. Decades of poor governance are blamed. And the COVID pandemic has hit the economy, shutting down the tourism which provided hard currency. There's very little infrastructure, and we travelled on mostly unpaved roads. Many communities are extremely remote, so what aid there is difficult to deliver. But the increasingly extreme weather has made subsistence farming even tougher. Many are being driven to sell or eat the herds they rely on, and people are becoming more and more desperate. These young herdsmen didn't want to be interviewed. But picking up rocks and waving their farming tools, they demand money to let us through, and then sit down in front of our vehicles and refuse to budge until we do. Our Malagasy colleagues begin negotiations as the herdsmen tell them they're hungry and they need money for food. Our drivers reluctantly hand over cash. When we reach the nearest village of Morofu, the village elder in orange is appalled at the attempted hold-up. Raids on the meagre crops here are on the rise. He's anxious to show us how malnourished the children are, and many are showing signs of acute malnutrition. This is all they now have to eat, cactus flowers, which are devoured very quickly. They offer some relief from hunger pangs, but they will bloat their bellies and cause cramps later. Many have blistered lips and the wizened skin of those 3 times their age. Of course these are not enough for us, but we've no choice, Hariba tells us. No one has electricity here. Only 15% of the whole country does, so many live in medieval conditions. Rohoniswa has 2 wives and 2 large families with a total of 16 children to feed. The population is soaring by nearly 3% a year, but in a country more than twice the size of Britain, it still has fewer than half the number of citizens. I can't ever fill these bowls with enough food for them, he says, and we're always hungry, but I water the rice down to make it go further. The village elder insists on escorting us out. His instincts are correct. The herdsmen have been waiting for us to leave on the single track out. The young men are scolded as they protest they need help. Everyone is hungry. We travelled on to the most southern tip of the country. The shifting sand of Faux Cap is never dormant and blankets everything. It's threatening livelihoods and burying homes and buildings. This was the police station. And this, the local government office, now so covered we're able to stand on its roof. The phenomenon known here as Tiumina, or Red Storm, has been dramatically changing this Indian Ocean coastline, ravaging crops and stifling development. The people in the south have not only been hit by the long drought, but also fierce winds, which often halts the fishing, which is one of the main sources of income. Henri Claude, the head of the village, hasn't been out on the water for more than a week now. Some of the brave or the desperate opt for other methods, but it can be dangerous and often fruitless. Henri Claude shows us the rows of sisal trees the villagers planted to try to restore this degraded land and rescue the ecosystem. It's a long-term strategy with the greenest of weapons. Many of them are just plain scared, not just of the future, but the here and now. We're afraid of living here, he says, and many people are leaving. They're afraid of the invasion by the dunes, and we just can't get investment here. The violent winds blow off roofs and make a living that's already hard even harder. And there are signs many of the villagers have already abandoned their homes and been forced to move on. So they're turning to other ways to survive. And by the look of this market, Madagascar's forests are being plundered and sold at an alarming rate. But all this has added to large-scale deforestation, with Madagascar losing 40% of its forests since the 1950s. We don't have anything to eat, we don't have anything to drink. We cut the wood because of the kere, he says. Kere is what the Malagasy call the drought that brings hunger. And right now Madagascar is burning away its future to get through the present, racking up one of the highest rates of deforestation in any tropical country. That's put its ecosystem at risk, destroying its habitat and putting the vast range of unique wildlife it's home to in great danger. We spotted an extremely rare radiated tortoise out in the open and lifted it away from the road. It's critically endangered and only found here in the south of Madagascar, but it's being killed for its meat or captured by poachers at such a rate that conservationists warn it could disappear from the wild forever within 20 years. These creatures are now very much at risk because the situation is so critical in Madagascar that they fetch a huge price on the black market. And if any of these are smuggled to order, usually out to the Far Eastern markets, they can raise thousands and thousands of dollars. But if caught, you face a very stiff prison sentence. The island contributes only 0.01% of global carbon emissions, yet it's feeling the most impact of climate change. We trekked into the forests on the eastern coast and within minutes saw wildlife found nowhere else on the planet. The country's widely considered to be the most biodiverse on Earth. If the country's put in peril, its citizens and its environmental heritage are too. This is a protected forest, but there are so many more areas of Madagascar which are being destroyed. It's incredible to think that there are hundreds and hundreds of species here in Madagascar that you will not find anywhere else in the world. And many conservationists believe that they are now in danger. Sinji's been travelling through this forest for 2 decades. He's never seen it so bad.
It's not good, the change. The change coming hot, high, hot, and dry. Dry. And the rain coming, if they come, rain too much, no stop, and flood everywhere.
The Malagasy government has so many tough challenges, and weaning its population off its dependence on coal is just one of them. They want the richer countries to help them and other African nations fund greener fuel alternatives. But right now, the Malagasy people are just fighting to live every day, and they desperately want change.